Okay, hey guys, so the first week, the week before spring break, the first set of videos, I had done a video for pirouette, just like tips and like technique things to check. And turns out I put it on private and I don't think anyone actually saw it. So if you saw it, good for you. I made it public last week when I was uploading videos. So you can go ahead and check back to that one, but I'm going to do another one today for everybody. So a couple of things that I wanted to talk about with pirouettes. First, I want to make sure that you guys are approaching it with the right mindset and like thinking about a pirouette in the correct way. And what I mean by that is, thinking about a pirouette as first and foremost a balance rather than a turn. And so you have to perfect the balance and you have to get the positioning right and all of the technical aspects of it right before you even start to learn how to turn. Because if you're turning with the wrong technique and with different alignment issues or just different things like that, you're just not going to do your pirouette well. It's just not going, you're not going to get the result that you want. And so, when you're working on your pirouettes, if you're not kind of focusing on like something and like really trying to experiment with different ways and different alignments and your weight or whatever, you're not going to get different results. So if you're constantly trying to do your pirouettes and you're not really trying anything new or trying anything different or honing in on technique, you're going to be doing the exact same thing. That's why I always say practice makes permanent, not perfect. It's not going to magically just appear. Your pirouette is definitely more of a science, and it has specific requirements for alignment in order to do it well. So I'm going to break that down a little bit today. Starting with how you practice your passe balance at the bar. So I always say, whenever you're doing a combination and you finish your combination and it's time for your balance, the way you get up to that passe position is so important. So if you're just like, okay, time for my balance now, I'm gonna get to my passe, and maybe your arm is like hanging out here, or I see some people even like sometimes it's just like floating wherever in like a non-position before you bring it to your first position to balance. That like cannot fly, because if you do that, you're gonna get it into your muscle memory when you're in center to like, your arms are gonna be all flying over the place. So first things first, same thing with your leg. You need to make sure that when you are practicing your balances at the bar, that you get there right away, and then you can focus on balancing. If you find yourself getting to your passe balance during a combination and you're like, oh man, like my arm wasn't coordinated with my leg, or I was too slow, or the position was off, don't even bother balancing, right? Go back to this position and keep practicing that motion of arm coordinating with leg getting to the exact position, right? You don't want to like get your leg here then be like, oh man, like my leg isn't turned out, let me quick turn it out, right? You want to get to that right away. So in order to be able to do that, you have to know what your passe position is, right? So a lot of you do this well at the bar, but when I see you going across the floor, you'll have like actual parallel, like not just like, oh, you can get your knee turned out more, like I'll see some parallel positions. So you want to make sure that we have the strength and the muscle memory of where that passe position is. I'm just going to talk about that for a second. So when you're practicing these, I don't even want you to bother with practicing turns for a while. But definitely keep practicing your pirouettes. I don't want you to like neglect practicing them. But before you get to practicing them, you have to really hone in on these like little details. So for starters, we need to make sure that our knee is to the side. Now, not everyone is going to have a perfect, like completely side knee. Like that's obviously the goal and that's what we should be pushing for. But if you're not there yet, that's totally fine. What I do care about though is that you have a position that like you're going as far as you possibly can, right? Because if you're not, you're never going to get it farther. You're never going to build that strength. So it should not be comfortable. You should be pushing past your comfort zone so that you're using these muscles, right? Your butt muscles, your hamstring muscles, your inner thigh muscles. All of those are working to pull both legs, not just your passe leg, right? Your bottom leg too is working just as hard, pulling that out, right? To the point where it's like you're kind of shaking, right? Now, with that, a lot of times the tendency is to rest our foot on our leg, and that should never, ever, ever happen. If you are resting your foot on your leg, first of all, you're not using all of your muscle strength. Second, you're probably sickling as well. So you want to make sure that your heel is coming forward as your toes are going backwards, right? If you start to cramp in that position, then you need to kind of do some more foot exercises, loosen up your foot, because you have to be pushing for that position. You never want to be sickled. Although it's really easy to be sickled in a passe. So you want to make sure your knee is side, it's touching, it's connected, but it's not resting, and that your heel is forward, right? And so that takes a lot of lower body work. And then additionally, you want to make sure that you're pulling up out of your hips with your lower abdominal muscles, with your oblique muscles, and all of your abs. So that's why I give you all those core exercises, and that's why it's so important to make sure you have a strong core. So now that we're tall, we're out of our hips, our core is engaged, our muscles are all working, our foot isn't sickled, our muscles are pulling that knee side and pulling that supporting leg, that turnout. I want to talk about where our weight is supposed to be. You should never, ever, ever, ever be in your heels. So the way I like to think about it is, if you're in your heel in your balance, or if you're in your heels when you're in a preparation, whether it's in 5th or in 4th, if your weight is stuck in your heels, that's just setting you up for a lot of extra work and probably a pirouette that's going to be off balance, thus falling over or falling out of it or not landing smoothly. So when you're in your passe and you're balancing, if you're balancing flat, do a couple like heel bounces or even like releves to make sure that that weight is over the ball of your foot. So the way I like to think about it is, if there's like a pole that goes to the ball of your foot, you want to make sure that your weight is over so that when you releve and come back down, you're like going up and down that pole, right? So if there's like a line going through you, you never want to be in your heel so that you have to go forward and then up, because guess what? Then you're like off balance. So practice your passe in releve, on flat, or a combination of the two. Making sure your arms are connected, that's another thing. Your arms are not just flopping here where they, can just move whatever. You want to make sure your elbows are lifted, shoulders are down, so that if I came by and pressed on them, they wouldn't go anywhere, they wouldn't budge. And that's the motion when you're in second for your preparation, as they're moving to your first and while they're in first, the whole turn, and then as you finish your pirouette, right? So what I want you to focus on this week is getting that alignment like nailed down, making sure that you know it, that your body knows it, and that when you're balancing or when you're practicing your releves, you can go right to that position like that. Like it's just like right in your muscle memory. And then once you get that, and once you know what your body is supposed to be doing, practice just holding it and seeing how long you can hold it, and just do your passes frequently to gain that strength, because a lot of times we know the correct alignment, but we're not strong enough to hold that. And that's totally fine. For me, I know the correct alignment to get my leg extensions all the way up there, my développés, and to hold them, but I don't have the strength for it. And so, in that sense, I'm not going to get it by doing it with poor technique. I'm going to get them by exercising the correct muscles, working on my lower développés, and then you can get higher and higher. And so if you don't have the strength to hold your knee to the side, if you don't have the strength to be up on a really high releve like that, then you need to work on that before you're going to be able to really nail down those pirouettes. So with all of that being said, I gave you a lot to think about. If you are really good at some of those things, but maybe need to work on others, then just figure out what you specifically need to work on. Or if maybe you have a lot of those things where you're like, oh man, I'm kind of working on a lot of those elements, just pick one or two and really get that down, make sure it's in your body, and then add some more, right? We always want to be working on that. And then if you're doing your pirouettes, if you're going to practice with your turns, make sure that your knee is side, make sure that you have the right alignment, make sure when you're in your plie, you're not sticking your butt out, because then when you go to pirouette, that butt's still going to be out. So just making sure that you're really honing in on every single detail, so that you have a good turn. And then two, don't forget to spot, shoulders down, all of that needs to come together. So if you feel like you're not good at pirouettes, it's not because it's just not your talent. A lot of people, we all have our gifts and talents. Some people are natural turners and they just are really good at it. Some people are naturally good at flexibility. Some people just have a natural strength about them. And so we all have our gifts and talents, and that's great. But a pirouette is something that it's literally just it's a science. Everyone can get better at it, regardless of where you're at. But you have to be making sure that you're working on something, doing something different, making a different choice each time to figure out what works for you. Where is the perfect place to put your weight on your preparation, and then figuring out what your problem thing is. Is it not pulling up in your core enough? Is it not spotting? Are your arms a little flaily when you're doing it? Or is it a combination of a couple different things? So work on it, gain that strength, and make sure that you're really honing in on the details that are right for you, and have fun with it.